I'd like to introduce our presenter today. Luke Klink is currently a lead security advisor with Rook Security, with more than a decade of hands-on security experience from configuring controls to setting strategy. Focusing on security strategy, assessments, program development, audit, risk, and privacy, Luke and his team empower clients to take their security program to the next level and beyond. Luke graduated from Indiana State University and currently holds the following certifications: CISSP, CRISC, and CISA. With that, I'd like to welcome Luke.
Thanks, Matt.
Sure, take it away.
Thank you all for joining. Thank you all for joining today. Really appreciate you giving us some time. And just real quick, as Matt already introduced me, just a few additional notes. I've been in a lot of your shoes. I've been on the other side of the table, been an Army of one, and also a leader of various size security programs. So I know the feeling when you're tasked with trying to implement controls and fight the battles for those budget dollars, to build a security program. Some of the company sizes I've been in, anywhere from 200 employees to 300,000 employees. Again, 1 to 300 security-focused employees, depending upon the companies, and you can obviously look at my LinkedIn profile and make those assumptions as far as which companies had, few to many. Various industries I've worked in, insurance, financial, government, wholesale, and now consulting. We're going to talk about real security and how to do real security and how dirty it can get. We'll focus on some pen testing, some other methods of testing security, and then we'll talk about some of the fun things that we get to do in security, evil things. So why is it we need to test security? Most of you, if you're in this field, you probably have that answer, but if we really need to cover it, we'll go through it. Obviously, breaches all over the news. Every week there's almost a new one. These ones are actually a little dated, and I left them in here on purpose because these are some of the bigger ones. It's rare that we hear a lot about data breaches that don't hit in the excess of millions and millions anymore. But if you haven't been paying attention to the news, what we're starting to see is the effect. We know that there is a cost to a data breach. We know that there's all kinds of articles out there, whether you're looking at the Verizon Business report or the Ponemon Institute reports that talk about the cost of a data breach. But what a lot of those don't always factor in are the settlement costs. So, Target settled with MasterCard for $19 million, and then just recently, I'll show you on the next slide, they settled with Visa. So some news since April, when one of the last times I gave a similar presentation, we saw that maybe you didn't hear about this one, but 4.5 million patients were breached out at UCLA Health Systems. Everybody's probably heard about this one, the online cheating Ashley Madison site. Obviously, that brings in a whole new level of breach from blackmail and all kinds of potential ramifications from that. Did anybody hear about the health insurer Excellus about 2 weeks ago? 10 million records. I hadn't heard of that until I went out and checked just to see what the latest breaches were. And again, we don't hear about these breaches where it's just 250,000 or 500,000 or 750,000. It's millions these days is what gets the news and our attention. And then just about a week ago, this came out that that banks are now going to join. They're permitted to sue Target for the data breach. So as we see various trends in data breaches, and we're still gathering data for 2015, this information can be pulled from various sites. One of the sites I like to reference a lot is privacyrights.org, where you can get information on all the data breaches since 2005 that have been reported, as well as various information and tips for privacy and building privacy programs and your rights to privacy. But as we look at the trends, what we see is that hacking obviously has been a big trend over the last 4 or 5 years. Continues to grow, continues to be an issue, followed by improper disclosure, portable media being lost, insider threats, physical break-ins, etc. So as we see the trends of hacking, most people are thinking, all right, somebody coming from the outside and gaining access through a poorly configured firewall or poorly configured servers or even applications, whatever the case may be. But a lot of times we don't think about hackers coming from the inside. So we look at PenTest, and you know, before I dive into different types of penetration testing, you know, I really want to talk about our PenTest really enough. We're seeing this large trend, everything's cyber this, cyber that, and I'm not a fan of the term cybersecurity. I think the problem with the term cybersecurity, people think too much on the tech side. They're not thinking enough about the non-sexy stuff in security, the policies, the process, the strategy, all those pieces that, you know, we need to make sure we're testing as part of an all-over, you know, well-rounded security program. So first thing that I think a lot of us are challenged with in trying to do is identifying what those critical assets are. Where does that data reside? You know, we can't secure what we don't know. So if you can't tell me where your most valuable data, your secret sauce is secured, we can't help you secure it. You have to have that information. You have to perform some type of data discovery exercise and document not only where that information is stored, but what systems and what processes utilize that data, what people have access to that data. So you have to know all of these things in order to implement a good security program. As I just said, must review all aspects of the security. People, process, technology. You know, if you've been in IT, you've heard those terms for many, many, many years. But I think we get too focused on the technology aspect. There's something out there that's, you know, got these blinky lights that looks really cool, that's going to keep me secure. It's going to keep the bad guys away. Well, it may slow them down, but if it's not properly configured, if it's not properly monitored, if it's not properly managed by processes and people, it's going to fail. So what a good, well-rounded security assessment entails is looking at all these pieces. It's looking at what is my strategy for security? You know, how am I going to take security to the next level? What regulatory pressures do I feel? What client pressures do I feel? You know, we're seeing a large trend over the last few years, and it's even growing now, more from some of the heavier regulated industries around client supplier questionnaires. So who are you providing services to? And if you're providing services to anybody in the financial, insurance industries, probably retail, anybody that might be transmitting some type of PII or PHI through your organization, you've likely answered some type of questionnaire, whether it's a 1 or 2 page of, you know, 20 to 50 questions, or maybe it's 1,500 questions spread out over a 17-page Excel worksheet. You know, I've seen them all. I've been part of responding to all and performed some of my own assessments for clients. So those are definitely growing. But what they look at is they look at more than just technology. They're going to look at the strategy. They're going to look at policies you have in place, the behaviors of your environment, of your employees, and how are you managing them. So it's important to be sure as you're looking at getting that next security assessment that you make sure your provider is going to cover all these things and not just focus on one piece of technology. Some other things that you might do or consider doing, you know, looking at general IT controls. If you're a SOX, if you fall under Sarbanes-Oxley and you have to do regular SOX audits, you're probably familiar with ITGCs and making sure that controls are in place and evidence is being captured and that those are being reviewed and managed. That's great. You know, keep that up, and if you're not doing that, might be something worth looking into, is self-auditing yourself, making sure that, you know, you guys are doing the things you say you're going to do. Performing a risk assessment. This is a great opportunity to really understand and show your board members, your execs, where the risks truly lie within your organization. A lot of people get caught up in, well, enterprise risk management or IT risk management, it's hard, where do we start, what do we do? Well, you don't have to necessarily focus on just the asset, and that's where a lot of past risk assessments have focused. It's identifying the asset and looking at the risk to that. That's hard, especially if you haven't undergone any type of asset management program, again, or identified where your critical assets or data resides. So look at it from a different approach. Look at it from risks, general risks that could be coming towards your environment. Look at it from the controls you have in place and what's the maturity level of those controls. One of the approaches we look at is it's a combined approach from looking at risks, how they map to controls, how those map to areas of impact. And then we can, in the end, we can give a financial dollar amount to executives and say, because we're not doing proper patch management, we're susceptible to this type of threat, therefore it could cause some type of probable loss magnitude in the amount of X, whatever X is. So there's your justification for going and spending a little bit of money, a fraction of what X would be, in order to have that program and shore up those risks. Vulnerability assessments, very common. You probably have, whether it's Nessus, Qualys, Rapid7, whatever the solution may be, running and identifying vulnerabilities and helping you to unmask, where are we not patching, where are things misconfigured. But it can be hard. When you look at something like what we're showing here, a vulnerability assessment, 2,525 vulnerabilities, that's a lot. I recall in my past I received a report from a tool that said in the subject line of the email, you have 252,529 or something like that vulnerabilities. And it's like, that's great. Set that aside. I don't know when I'm ever going to chance to address that. So what you need to make sure your tools are doing is that they're configured and they're tweaked to give you valuable, actionable information. So even though we may have 2,525 vulnerabilities, all right, let's break those out. And how many hosts, how many unique vulnerabilities are those? Is that if I've got 400 hosts that are affected by one patch, all right, that makes up a large chunk of those vulnerabilities. But focus on, obviously we focus a lot on the criticals, we focus on the highs and the mediums, the 0 days. That's great, but make sure that you have the process and the strategy around continually assessing and continually patching. Quite common, just focusing on doing a pen test or a vulnerability assessment without treating the problem of the process for patch management. It's just going to lead to the same results over and over. So let's talk briefly about some penetration testing. Common things I hear is, well, we don't want to do pen tests. We don't see the value in a pen test. We scan. We think that's enough. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's not. Or we might see, we did a pen test. They found 2,500 vulnerabilities that they said they could exploit. They didn't prove it. They just said they could. Or another common response is, well, we don't want to disrupt business. Okay, that's fair, but do you think the bad guys care about disrupting your business? No, they don't. So it's important that we define a penetration test properly. A penetration test can come in many forms, in many factors, in many shapes, and many approaches. What a pen test is not is just a discovery of vulnerabilities, whether they're system vulnerabilities, whether they're human factor vulnerabilities, physical vulnerabilities, whatever the case may be. They're not based on a set of assumptions. We don't base a pen test on assuming that, well, I found, you missed a critical Microsoft patch last week, and then I could, exploit your environment and then get into your database and steal data. That's a lot of assumptions being made without proving it out. And pen tests are not easy and painless. A good pen test is going to take some time. There's going to be some reconnaissance. It's going to be detailed. It's going to be very tactical in the approach and methodology. We're going to prove out the vulnerabilities. We're going to prove out that, yes, due to that Microsoft vulnerability or that Adobe vulnerability, whatever the case may be, we were able to gain access. And here, here's a snapshot of us in the database, or here's a snapshot of some data, or here's a snapshot of some sensitive emails that we were able to obtain. Here's, photographic evidence of us circumventing a physical security control. Here's a shot of us looking through your boardroom and sitting in the president's chair with our feet up on his desk, whatever the case may be. We're going to prove that out. They are, though, however, controlled. It's important, going back to the we don't want to disrupt business, it is important that we do perform these in a controlled environment, in a controlled manner, so we don't disrupt business, or at least limit the amount of disruption to the business. Those are controlled make sure your provider is controlling those through well-defined methodologies, and they're sharing out how are we going to approach this piece of the pen test, whether it be system testing, social engineering, physical, whatever the case may be. Make sure there's a proper communication plan in place. Also, pen tests are becoming more dirty. So we're all familiar with the Internet of Things, or IoT acronym. Everything, we all know, everything's connected these days. It's terrible, but it is dirty. It's, attacking a pacemaker, attacking an automobile. Maybe I attack somebody's Nest, if you're familiar with the little Nest devices that control your HVAC system at home. Those are wired onto the network. Are they secure? If I get into your network and I crank the heat up in your house, or turn the heat off in the winter and freeze some pipes, all of these things could potentially cause some type of negative impact to your environment, whether it's your personal or your business environment. And it's important to know, I mentioned this earlier, the baddies, they don't play by the rules. They don't have to play by these rules of where, well, we are only going to scan during certain hours, and we're not going to flip over the desks. We're just going to open the door and flip on the lights and see what we can see. The good malintent individuals wanting to get into your environment, they're going to try to go unnoticed. They're not going to make a lot of noise. So they may cause some type of disruption. Maybe they cause a denial of service attack, and then they're coming in up some back door that they found while you're fixing the DDoS attack. They're over there getting in the back door into the database. So it's important to know that with unlimited resources, don't have to play by the rules, and the desire to gain access to an environment, they're going to do whatever they can to do so. So this chart here outlines really the types, or I should say common definitions we see of a pen test. And when you look at the way Rook defines a pen test, and I myself define a pen test, that third column is the proper way. A pen test is not just a vulnerability scan. It's not running a scan and giving you a report that says you have 252,000 vulnerabilities discovered. It provides no value, no guidance for remediation. Yeah, I know I need to patch stuff, but that doesn't really tell me, well, what's critical, what's not critical. A vulnerability assessment, while good, is not validation of, validation of vulnerabilities being exploited. Again, whether it's system or physical or behavioral. We can say, well, yeah, we sent out a phishing email to 100 employees. Well, that doesn't really tell me anything. Okay, you sent it out. Well, we had 50 click on it. Okay, that's great. But, did you gain information from them? Maybe you had 50 click on the email, then you had 25 provide credentials. Okay, were you able to then use those credentials for anything, to get into my environment and observe or take data? It's the entire process from start to finish must be executed to call it a real pen test. So make sure especially with your suppliers, or your clients are asking you as their supplier to do a pen test, that you're really doing a pen test and you're not just doing a high-level vulnerability scan or a vulnerability assessment, whatever the target may be. Some of the common pen testing methodologies that we'll talk about now, as we look at, you've probably heard of red teaming or red team. So red team is attack. These are the teams that are going to go into attack mode. They're going to do proper reconnaissance. They're going to identify threats and vulnerabilities. They're going to do some recon through threat intelligence. This is an area that's really grown in the last couple of years. So if you're not familiar with threat intelligence, it's It's using open source information, using tools to gain knowledge about your individuals or even your company. So if somebody's out talking about, the next super secret merger or acquisition, somebody might intercept that information, and maybe that's information that can be sold to a competitor. Maybe there's information out there on social media that talks about one of your executives and maybe his travel plans, or maybe they're a target. So all of these things are, again, gloves are off, it's dirty. Whatever it takes for me to get into your environment, we're going to do it. Blue teaming's the opposite. So a blue teaming test is looking at how do we monitor and detect a red team type of attack. How do we build defenses and make sure that we're circumventing the attacks, and whether it's slowing them down or completely preventing the attacks, it's an important piece. It's an important element of a pen test. And then we also do some purple team type engagements. So this is both teams working together. It's the spy versus spy. It's attack, defend, attack, defend. So, we may launch, say we launch a denial of service attack. How does the blue team detect that and defend against it? And then we huddle up, and then we talk, and then we go back and we test again. So, the sky's the limit really with how you combine these types of methodologies into your pen testing strategy and approach. At Rook, we have teams specifically designed to do these exact types of tests. So now comes the fun part. This is where we really get dirty. This is where we talk about black team. Black team is slow and steady. It's going to take some time. We're going to spend a lot of time learning about your environment. We're going to have a very tactical plan. There'll be limited communications, limited individuals we'll be communicating with. We may insert somebody on the inside. We may get a janitor hired, and then he spends 2-3 months in the corporate environment, learning about the systems, learning about the flow of traffic, learning about individuals and who has access to what doors are propped open, what doors do systems reside behind. What doors does he have access to? Data exfiltration. We're going to slowly extract data as we can, whether it's through that inside source or via other means. There's going to be phishing campaigns. There's going to be social engineering attacks. There's going to be physical intrusions performed. Not causing damage. We're not going to smash and grab, but we're going to circumvent key fob readers or motion detector sensors that release doors and gain access to your environment. And it really is going to be a test of an incident response program if you have one. How do you respond to these types of incidents? How do you respond to somebody doing a phishing campaign? Do your employees, are they alert enough? Are they aware to report those? We're very successful, and most companies that perform these types of engagements will tell you very successful in sending out phishing emails and phishing campaigns. Everybody wants that deal. Everybody wants the next big thing. If we can offer an iPhone for $50, who doesn't want to click on the link just to see what it's about, right? And then we take you to a web page and sign up here. We had an engagement where we did a corporate perks program. Those are very common in organizations today, where you can get super deep discounts. So what we do, we spoofed an email address, set it up to look just like the company, corporate mega perks, sent it out to employees, and we targeted about 100, 150 employees. We had about a 50% response rate on clicks on the email, and then from that we had at least another 50 another 50% of that 50% respond, and we obtained credentials. And the beauty of this one was we even had a place where you could sign up your coworker, and we had people, yeah, go ahead and send it to Jim, send it to Sally. Here's her email. Here's her email, here's her number. So it's real simple to do. And that's where it gets real. That's where the gloves are off. Again, we're portraying the bad guys that don't have to play by the rules. we're going to do whatever it takes to get in your environment. That's what we're there for. So real quick, I'm going to stop and pause. Matt, have there been any questions thus far? And if not, I'll just continue. Okay, I'll take that as a no. I didn't hear Matt interrupt with questions, so I'll take that as we don't have any questions yet. All right, so now I just kind of gave you a story from a pen testing perspective, or I'm sorry, a phishing perspective. So we'll talk through some other ones. So when we take the gloves off, one of the common fun things we like to do is look at methods of pen testing outside of systems, outside of running Nessus, Qualys, Rapid7, Metasploit, Burp Suite, whatever the tool may be. So let's step out of the technology aspect of it and let's look at some of the other areas that are less likely looked at from a pen testing perspective that can generate just as much data and just as much information and goods that we're trying to get after. So when we attack the human weaknesses, distractions, they come in many forms. Whether it's your mobile phone, some of you might be tweeting right now. Whether it's walking down the street, talking on the phone, fire truck goes by, you're sitting there getting coffee, your kids, whatever the case may be. People are just naturally distracted today. But we're also helpful. Everybody wants to help, mostly. Everybody wants to give directions. Everybody wants to help that guy get in the door if his arms are full. And what we want to do is we exploit the unknown or the scary. So there's a lot of many of you probably are in the same boat as me, and you are the IT support person for your own family and friends. I just got a call from my mother last week saying, hey, I got this thing popping up saying I got this virus and I need to call this number to get the removal kit, and it's 1995 and et cetera, et cetera. And I'm like, Mom, stop, no, don't do that, and work through it. So there's the intent to exploit the unknown and scary. If you don't know that's a bad malicious type of attack against your system, that you've got a virus. One, she probably didn't have a virus. It was just an ad. We checked later and everything cleared out. But she didn't know. And if she didn't get a hold of me, would she have clicked on that? Right? If you have people, friends and family that aren't as tech savvy as many of us, they may fall victim to that. How many times do you get the phone call, or you've seen the reports of phone calls or emails going out saying, well, this is the IRS, you owe taxes, you didn't pay your taxes, you can make this go away for X. It's trying to exploit that unknown or the scary to gain access or to get what it is we're after. Physical weaknesses, so quite common. Very few companies we see have closed circuit TV. They're not monitoring their entrances. They're not monitoring areas that may contain sensitive data, or they have cameras and they don't work. Quite common. We've walked up to a kind of one of those black, look like a turret in the ceiling, and you see the camera, it's just pointing straight down, no light on, it's just broken, or pointed at the wall because the PTZ, pan tilt zoom feature is disabled, and it got stuck looking at the wall. Quite common and makes it so much easier to circumvent physical security. Quite common is limited visibility. There's no monitoring, or if there is monitoring, it's poorly configured. So if you're not monitoring your environment, whether it's systems, whether it's physical security, whatever the case may be, you have no visibility into your environment. You have no way to properly gain intelligence and properly respond to incidents and attacks and potential attacks. Many discussions we have are, yeah, I have IDS, I have IPS, but I'm not sure what it's doing for me. Or again, I get all these alerts. Well, that may be symptoms of a poorly configured system. We need to make sure that the tools that you use are configured properly to give you good visibility and good intelligence into your environment. So some of the attacks that we've had the joy of going through in the last few years, I kind of showed there on the right. So as we look at physical security attacks, a secured building downtown Chicago, you would think that building security would be of utmost importance, especially over the last decade or so. This is the lobby of that building. It's a very large building. I don't remember how many floors, but I think, going up to the 30th some floor. Went in early that morning, about 7:30 to observe foot traffic, and kind of never set foot in the building, didn't know what to expect. We did some recon through Google Maps, just kind of of the perimeter and the street view. So I go into the building, sit and have a bagel and a coffee and kind of watch traffic, and I decide, okay, it's time for me to go see what I can do. So I'm standing across from these turnstiles, maybe 20, 30 feet away, and I kind of watch the flow of traffic. There's a security guard standing at another elevator bay. There are 3 elevator bays, and all of a sudden I hear an alarm go off. One of the turnstiles triggers an alarm at one of the bays. He walks over, flips a switch on the back of it, and walks away. A couple minutes later, another alarm goes off. Kind of watch him. He looks a little frustrated, walks over to another turnstile, flips a switch, shakes his head, walks away. So clearly, he's not overly concerned that alarms are going off. And as I watch, I see people pulling roller boards that the system detects as 2 people walking through, or maybe somebody's badge didn't scan. And it's hard to see in this picture, but on this right column there you see that little circle, almost where the bars look like they're coming across. That's the scanner. And as I watch, I see people scan a badge. Some people scan their cell phones, turnstiles open, and they go on in. So finally, I see my moment of me to try to gain access. I look down. The security guard's talking to a pretty lady, so he's distracted. Everybody else walking towards this turnstile I'm going to go in is on their cell phone. They're distracted. So I walk up. I just follow a group of 4 people, hold my cell phone down on the scanner, make it look like I scan. Sure enough, the turnstiles are still open because so many people are going through. Alarm goes off. I go in that elevator right there on the left. Nobody looks up. I play it off. Oh, I guess it didn't scan. Played it off. Nobody said a word to me. No security guard ever came. I said, okay, well, here I go for my ride up to the 30th floor. Get off on the 30th floor. I'm expecting to see security or somebody, right? There was a camera in this little lobby here. Somebody saw me walk on the elevator. Nobody. I get off the elevator with actually an employee of that company. She was gone through a door before I could even try to tailgate with her. Never said anything to me. So I start walking around on this floor. After about 3 minutes of trying to figure out what door I can get in next, I get near the receptionist desk. And I pretend I'm on my phone talking to somebody, but that doesn't stop her. She was pretty good about stopping me, and we had a conversation about who I was, what I was doing there, and so, well, I've got a meeting with so-and-so. And, well, she's asked, well, how'd you get up here? I said, well, I came up through the elevator. And she said, well, how'd you get on the elevator? I said, I walked through the turnstile. I said, well, how'd you get through the turnstile? I said, I followed somebody. And she was appalled that nobody stopped me, that I circumvented every physical control in place to keep me out of that building. That's very common, and then, if you think about it, that's pretty scary. Some other areas of weaknesses within the same building. This was a door left propped open. That was how I found the door. That's the freight elevator. So door propped open to the freight elevator makes it very common or easy for the UPS guy or somebody disguised as the UPS guy to gain access to the employee work environment. Another engagement we were on, we're based out of the Indianapolis area, so this engagement just happened to be here in Indy. Much smaller office building, 3 or 4 stories, a suburb of Indianapolis, where we gained access. Just walked in. We did our recon for a couple days. We tried to scan ID badges, clone ID badges, gained it, but quite frankly, we gained access just by piggybacking and walking in. So a building I go into, pretend I'm on my phone, pretend I'm distracted, hop on an elevator with this poor lady carrying a handful of 2 liters of pop and a basket of goodies. Must have been a pitch-in day. She kind of looks over at me, and I ignore her because she's looking at me to scan, fob the elevator so we can get up, and she sets all of her stuff on the ground. I'm still on the phone. Ask me which floor, and I say, oh, whatever floor she was going to. I knew at 3, which it happened to be, and that's where I was trying to get to. So I go to 3, and she never said anything who I was. And we get off the elevator, and then we decide to hang out. So we find a training room, and I pop up a training room laptop, and I get this log on to Windows screen. Of course, great, Windows XP, fantastic. And you know what, let me just try train 2, happened to be the username already input. So guess what the password was? Yep, train 2. So pretty simple, I was in. And then I was able to look at, all kinds of stuff. So we got onto the internal intranet. We found a check request form. Great. Let me get some account numbers and we can make some check requests. Found a fund transfer request. And I really like this one. I found the process for gaining business cards. So basically, I had the ID, password, and the website to go make my own business cards for this company. And that makes it so much easier to get around, as you can imagine. So in short, we spent a good 4 hours in a conference room, walking around, doing scans of their Wi-Fi. We had a gentleman walk around with a big antenna attached to the back of his MacBook. Nobody ever stopped him. Nobody ever questioned him. He sat down in the network area with the networking team, sat down in a desk, took a picture of himself on the desk with a guy standing behind him, distracted on a cell phone. Nobody ever stopped us. Finally, we got bored. We opened opened the conference room door, spoke up, got a little noisier just to try to, get people to stop by and ask us who we were. And when you see 4 guys sitting around a desk, all with these MacBooks in a predominantly Windows shop, they don't look like they belong. Nobody reserved that conference room. We should not have had unfettered access to this company for that long of a period. Access to their network, you name it, we had everything we needed. So one thing I want to make sure when we talk about phishing, going back to that example, a lot of people don't use, or they don't go with a phishing type of a pen test because they feel like, well, what data are they going to get, or how are you going to gain access? And another example, a recent example, and I don't have a lot of pictures or photos or evidence of this yet, we were able to gain access to a network solely by phishing. Their perimeter was secure. We performed a pen test. Firewall devices, servers, and the DMZ, everything was secure. We may have found vulnerabilities, but when we did the pen testing, the validation, we were unable to exploit them. So there was no way into their environment for that we could find, within the scope of that pen test. However, we had performed the phishing exercise, and by doing the phishing exercise, we obtained some credentials, and we were able to sit in the parking lot essentially and get on their wireless network. And once we were on their wireless network with those credentials, we were able to get into some email, and we were able to see some SEC filings and see some sensitive information and find PII being sent, transmitted in email. So going back to it, it's really important to look at all aspects of security and proper security testing. So things to look for. Reconnaissance, somebody that doesn't belong or looks out of place. If somebody's walking around aimlessly, staring at doors, staring at cameras, looking at windows, walking the perimeter of your environment, question them. If somebody's taking pictures of doors or controls or cameras, somebody's sitting in a parking lot. We had an engagement where a gentleman parked his big F-150 out right on the curb, right outside of the training room, where we had a wireless access point plugged in, and he was, trying to get whatever he could from that. Nobody ever stopped us. If you see an antenna sticking out of a bag, probably doesn't belong. If somebody gets too close to you, if you've got your common, we see this all the time. You have your, you say you have your key card stuck on your belt, right? And that's where you just clip it on your belt. That way you have it with you always. And well, if I can get within 5 feet and I've got the right equipment, I can clone your ID badge. Put your badge up. Or if somebody's getting way too close, something's not right. Step back, question. If you see an increase in spam and phishing, that could be signs of an attack forthcoming. Some examples of this where I thought I was busted, but I wasn't. This is actually a building in Shanghai we were in doing an assessment. And it was time for me to do the physical assessment of the building, that our client was in. So I went down to the lobby and I told everybody, if I'm not back, please come find me, or, hit up the authorities, and maybe I'm in a Shanghai prison. I don't know. I didn't know how they were going to react to this. So I'm in this lobby, and the picture on the left, you can see that's the guard desk. The guards actually were up walking around. But I wanted to take a picture of the camera. You'll see a camera kind of above the couple blurry people in the door in the entryway, just to show that, there are cameras, there is monitoring being done in this lobby. And then the other picture is from the other end of that, again, showing the cameras. And what happened about this time when I'm taking this picture, I hear these people running towards me, and I'm like, oh crap, here it is. But they were actually running to get somebody else, fortunately. So, crisis averted. I did not end up spending time in a Shanghai prison, which I was very thankful for. But, nobody once questioned me, though. That was the surprise of it all. I was shocked that I wasn't questioned. So how do we execute these? Typically, you're going to see teams of 2 or more working together. Quite common, you'll see, there might be a guy that tries to pass a fake ID or a fake business card, and then there's a guy on the other end of the phone, his buddy, validating all of that. We're going to find the easiest point of entry, whether that's physical or whether that's through phishing or a weak system. And we're going to have a good backstory. We're going to have a reason why we belong. We're going to have a reason why we're there. And we're not going to stop short of the authorities being notified. But we're also going to have a retreat plan. We're going to have a way out. Happened to me once. I got on the wrong floor, and I get off on the elevator. There's a security guard, armed security guard behind a desk, giving me the stink eye. I knew I had no way out other than just to go up and play that I was looking for a company that used to be in that building. And he was quick to point me back down the stairs, and I went back down to the reception. So, being very prepared is part of a real pen tester's toolkit, and having those stories. As we execute, if something sounds too good to be true, it probably is. I'm sure you've heard that from your parents or somebody. I know I have. No prince is going to send you millions of dollars, just because you can save thousands on the next computer card doesn't mean you need to click on the link. Make sure you're informing your employees to watch out for these. If you see too many new guys at once, if you see 4 guys sitting in a conference room that you've never seen before, and nobody's communicated that there's going to be a bunch of contractors on site, there's probably something going on there. If an alarm sounds, pay attention. That's the easiest thing you can do is pay attention. Whether it's a physical security alarm or not unfortunately, Target's become a kind of a case study, but, Target had the controls in place. They had the systems in place monitoring, but nobody paid attention to the alarms. If you see a disruption in performance or service, that could be an attack looming or underway. And if you see variances in behavior in an employee, whether they're a new employee or a long-term employee, maybe something's going on there. It could be some type of potential insider threats. Some things to think about that I didn't cover yet. Having a plan to react to specifically physical intrusions is very key and important. As a security professional in general, I don't expect the 4-foot admin assistant to approach, some guy that looks like he might be up to no good. But have a plan in place. Have a plan for that 4-foot admin to go get the 6'5" guy that nobody's going to mess with, and then approach the guy. Or, call an internal, maybe there's an internal 411 number or something, extension you can call to get to security. So have a plan in place, communicate it to your employees. Have a plan in place for system attacks. What should employees be looking for? What types of disruptions should they look for? What types of emails should they look for that could show that an attack is underway? And give them a process to properly communicate and report those. Then I'll make sure that, as we talk about real security being dirty, I hope if you gain anything out of this that you kind of understand that there's more methods to testing security than just looking at technology and just looking at a pen test or just looking at a vulnerability assessment. Make sure that you have all of the bases covered. Make sure you're looking at people, process, technology, that you know where your data resides. Because the last thing you want is this guy coming in, hanging out in your conference room for 4 hours, gaining access to check request forms, and being able to gain access to your data and disrupt your business. So with that, we're at about 45-minute mark. So I want to make sure we leave time for questions. Matt, I'll leave it to you to manage the questions if there are any.
So we just had one question so far, and it had to do with the banking industry. It asked, what is the most important thing that we should consider as being part of the banking industry when it comes to pen testing?
I think it applies to banking and any industry. It's going back to kind of the core tenets of looking at everything. Most the banks that I have been involved with have pretty regular audits and assessments that they're going to undergo regardless. But I think it's making sure that you're looking in the right places. We see, again, going back to what I said earlier, we see a common request is, well, you need to get a pen test. Okay, well, that's not very specific, right? Again, understanding where your critical data is. Obviously, from a banking perspective, right, where is all the financial data? But looking at more than just systems, looking at the processes in place. From a bank perspective, are your employees trained to identify the types of threats that might come into a bank, the type of fraudulent activity that could occur, whether they be phone calls, whether they be phishing emails, and how do you respond to those? There's obviously a lot of regulations you can refer to out there that have requirements and controls to be put in place, but just general good security practice on understanding where your data is, having a strategy, having policy, and then executing upon it and regularly testing it. I would recommend that for not just banks, but anybody.
Okay. A couple more questions came in. This one's from Sean. How should we best manage the surplus of logs? Event logs, firewall logs, syslogs, ISP logs, etc.
Yep. Yeah, that's a tough one. But I feel like SIM tools, security and incident and event management tools have come a long way. Depending upon the size of your environment and how those logs scale, it can be challenging. It's a lot of information to review through. It's good to find. I would recommend finding a service provider to help you through those challenges. There are tools out there certainly that you can use, but I think it's important to get assistance from the experts that live and breathe this. And this isn't just a shameless plug, it's the truth. I mean, there's so much information, coming through the various logs, whether it's firewall, servers, IDS, IPS, whatever the case may be, and then correlating all of those events together to really understand, really gain that ability to respond properly to those incidents. It's common. We see a lot of companies just pushing everything to a syslog server and storing it there, and that's great. You have it. You have that information if you need to go back for forensics types of investigations, but without being able to process and correlate that through some type of tool, you're not going to gain that ability to get ahead of the incident and respond properly.
Okay. This question comes from Paul. Companies have spent millions of dollars in time on securing their environments but still get breached. To me, this seems like there needs to be some new thinking about where to spend time and money. Do you see any new approaches coming in ways to thwart these attacks? What we've been doing doesn't seem to be working.
Paul, I would totally agree. And I think that's been the common trend or the common message that I've been is telling everybody is, everybody's asking for a pen test. Everybody wants to know that their perimeter is secure. Well, you look at a lot of these breaches and they don't happen from the outside. They're happening from, some of them are happening from the inside. We're not looking at how we're training employees. We're not looking at whether they're malicious or not. Many breaches can be accidental misuse of information systems because we haven't trained our employees or they didn't know. I've seen a breach where very clever breach, it didn't make the news, but it was definitely, an intrusion into an environment where an admin assistant, this company happened to use Google Docs. She received an email saying, hey, I need to share this Google Doc with you, log in here. From the outside, she didn't know any better. She entered the CEO's Google ID and password, completely vulnerable at that point in time. So, I think it all starts with training our employees. I think it looks, again, looking at where is my data residing, and then layering the controls around that. So you've heard the term secured or defense in depth, secured layers of defense. I think that's a critical element, is making sure that we're adding layer upon layer of security to circumvent the attacks, but look at it from more than a technical standpoint. A firewall is not going to save the day. You got to have the process. You got to have the process for managing that firewall. You got to have the process for properly configuring that firewall, making sure the rules you're using act and perform as intended. You have to make sure somebody's managing that and looking at logs and responding to incidents and alerts. So I think the answer is just taking a better approach and getting back to the basics and looking at overall security strategy and how you're aligning yourself with a security program and not just focusing on technology.
Okay, great. Someone was asking if this was going to be recorded and if the slides would be available. The answer is yes. We'll put out an email afterwards with links to both of those. And there's two other questions that are kind of similar, and you may have already answered them in another roundabout way, but I'll go ahead and ask you anyway, Luke. The first one here is from Rick. When working with a client, what steps does Rook take to determine if a breach has occurred without the client's knowledge?
Say that one more time, make sure I understood that.
So with your clients, what do we do to determine if a breach has occurred and the client doesn't know about it? How do we bring it to their attention, I guess is what the question is.
Okay, yep. Yeah, great. Okay, so one of the ways that we actually have done that with current clients is through our threat intelligence service. So we have individuals that basically scour the dark web, social media, paste bins, and anywhere you can think of to look for information that our clients deem to be sensitive or critical. Our clients provide us with keywords or tags that we then insert into our processes, and we've untracked or uncovered instances where IDs and passwords have been pasted and tried to be sold. We've seen sensitive data fly across social media. One of our guys at one point was able, they weren't a client of ours, but saw, I think it goes back about 2 years, saw one of the NASA breaches before it happened. A week before it was announced, we saw information going over the web about this breach on NASA, and we reported it directly to NASA. So, and we do that quite often. I mean, as we see something, whether they're a client or not, if we see that, hey, this is a potential that somebody's doing specific targeted recon on your environment, you need to be alerted of that. Some people, it's kind of taken different ways. Some people think it's us trying to drum up business, which it's not. It's us trying to be, you know, good stewards in the security world to trying to create a better place, a more secure place. So hopefully that answers your question.
Good. Okay. Looks like there's one last question. If anyone wants to sneak another question in, you've got a couple more minutes. But the question comes from Don. What types of vulnerabilities have you found typical and surprising in regards to physical security systems?
I'm getting to the point where not a lot surprises me anymore, unfortunately. Probably the greatest are the ones where secure doors, they have motion sensors on the inside, and you can trip those from outside. Whether it's through let's say poor weather stripping, and I can get something through the door. We were able to get crafty in one engagement and actually use a pretty high-powered laser and a mirror to trip a sensor. There's other methods and tools. Helium balloons and hand warmers is a common tactic. And the solution for that is you move the motion sensor out of the way to where, you know, the individual on the outside can't obtain it or obtain access. Some of the other things would be poor controls on data centers, not your third-party colos, but, you know, individual on-prem data centers. Maybe there's no lock, or the door's propped open because it's kind of warm in there. You know, you got a couple issues right there. Now we're getting into environmental issues, you know, from a security aspect. But I think the biggest surprise, honestly, going back to the example I used in Chicago, was just being able to get into a large structure in downtown Chicago and not being stopped. I was stopped by the little 4-foot admin assistant sitting behind the desk that wasn't going to let me by regardless of my story. So that's the common, but you know, it's also common that people don't test physical security. Like, oh no, we're secure, or yeah, we know we need to do more. Well, you know, test it. Let's see where you need to do more. You know, let's see what controls are in place. It's pretty easy for me to take out my driver's license and jimmy a lot of locks if they don't have the proper door guard on them, you know, to keep me out. And nobody knows. There's no camera on there. You know, there's no alarm on the door. So there's a lot of ways that we can find to get into a building, and you know, we're typically pretty successful at them. But not too many surprise me anymore because I've seen quite a few.
Okay, great. And then there's one more question that came in on PCI, about PCI. It says, can you please briefly address pen testing requirements for significant changes that must be executed for PCI DSS compliance?
I would love to answer that question, but I am not yet a PCI QSA. I'm actually attending training in a few weeks. But I would love for us, Matt, if we can just capture that information and we can respond to that person directly, or maybe even respond to the group. We can respond to the group if, you know, in a follow-up. So I want to make sure our PCI guys answer that accordingly.
Will do. All right, well, with that, we're at the top of the hour. So, Luke, thank you for your time, and thank you to everyone who called in today. We hope it was helpful and beneficial for you. You'll receive a follow-up from us shortly with the slide deck and the recording. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.